is to introduce them in alphabetical order by first name. And so our first panelist is Dr. Barry Johnson. Dr. Johnson. Dr. Johnson is a professor and senior associate dean of the School of Engineering and Applied Science at the University of Virginia. He is also a board member of the Commonwealth Center for Advanced Manufacturing, CCAM. Our second panelist is Deborah Crowder. Deborah is the executive director of the South Central Workforce Investment Board for Area 8, that includes Halifax County as well as the adjoining Mecklenburg and Charlotte counties. Our third panelist is Liz Povar. Liz is the Director of Business Development for the Virginia Economic Development Partnership, VEDP. Our fourth panelist is Dr. James Groves. Dr. Groves is the Assistant Dean for Research and Outreach at the University of Virginia. And our fifth and final panelist is Leigh Cockram. Leigh is the Executive Director of the Southern Virginia Regional Alliance, comprised of 6 jurisdictions, including Halifax County. Let's give our panelists a hand. We are quite fortunate to have such a distinguished group of individuals on our panel, and I look forward to what they have to share with us today. We will be passing the mic, Dr. Johnson. And so I will ask, great. At this time, I'll ask each panelist to share their 5 minutes. If you want to stand, you can do that.
Well, thank you very much. Again, my name is Barry Johnson, and first I'd like to thank the organizers and the moderator for inviting me to participate. I'm delighted to be here and look forward to the discussion. As far as my background is concerned, as was noted, I'm employed by the University of Virginia. I serve as a professor there. I serve as senior associate dean there for the engineering school. But I think it's my experience with CCAM that probably puts me on this panel. I was fortunate to be engaged with CCAM from its conception in 2006 and was a part of the team that actually defined the business plan and created CCAM, and then I was fortunate to serve as the initial director of CCAM in the founding days prior to hiring Dave Lohr, who joined us a little over a year and a half ago as the executive director of CCAM. But during that process of serving as executive director, I was part of a team that recruited the initial 7 founding corporate members to CCAM. And it was that experience that I think helps some with this panel, and part of that process, I visited the manufacturing facilities of every one of those companies, and we have in that founding list companies from Switzerland, companies from the United Kingdom, companies from Japan, from Sweden, as well as U.S.-based companies as well. And so, I think that process of actually seeing the manufacturing facilities, all of which I would categorize as advanced manufacturing facilities, having a chance to see the workers in those facilities and having a chance to talk to the leaders of those companies and ask them what their biggest problems were. And I think that is in essence what CCAM, the organization that I now serve on the board for, can bring to the table, because it's that connection to those companies so that we can have conversations with them, not about where the employees of 10 years ago were within their companies, but where are the employees of 10 years from now going to be in those companies, and what are the skill sets that are going to be required, and what are the types of jobs that are going to exist within that organization over the next 10 to 15 years. And so again, thank you all for having me. I'm delighted to be here and look forward to the conversation.
Good afternoon. I'm Deborah Crowder. I'm the director of the Workforce Investment Board for Area 8. I am a product of Southside Virginia. I was born and raised in Mecklenburg County, adjoining here. My children were born here at Halifax Hospital, and I went to Longwood University, which was Longwood College way back many, many years ago. My other career before I started workforce training was in middle school education. I was in a middle school for 27 years, and I have been doing working as director of the Workforce Board for 9. And I'm a part of this panel because of what the Workforce Board does in our area. It covers 10 counties in South Central Virginia, with Halifax being one of the 10. And we have 4 workforce centers around the 10-county area where adults can go to get services for finding jobs, for helping with resumes, job search, and for people who need to be trained or retrained. We have funds to pay for those people to go back to school. And we also have contracts with Southside Virginia Community College for an in- and out-of-school youth program, and there are case managers in all 11 high schools in the county to assist at-risk youth stay in high school. The board itself is a volunteer board. It's comprised of at least three representatives from each of the 10 counties, and it is a business-led board. So at least 2 of the representatives of the board are from the private sector. And the board's responsibility is to develop policy and implement those policies to help our workers get trained in areas of growth and areas where they can find jobs. And that's kind of the dilemma we're in today, is in this high time of unemployment, we are training, but jobs are not very plentiful, as a lot of you know. So I look forward to today. Thank you, Nettie, for asking me, and I look forward to talking with some of you later.
Good afternoon. Is everybody awake? Okay, just wanted to be sure. My name is Liz Povar, and I'm actually was the Director of Business Development for the Virginia Economic Development Partnership, but I'll tell you all today I'm now the Vice President for Business and Ally Services, so I'm just going to give myself a promotion and go from there. Actually, we did a reorganization, so we're just starting to roll that out. I'm actually not from Virginia. I'm from Indiana, but I spent the professional start of my career in Emporia, Greensville. So if many of you are from Halifax County, you probably know that area as well. So my roots are pretty deep in Southern Virginia. I've got 28 years in the profession. I know that I look like I'm only 25, but I've got 28 years in the profession. And of those 28 years, 10 were spent at the local level in economic development and 18 at the state level. So what I actually do is go to companies and tell them that I'm here from the government and I'm here to help you. And all right, that's all the jokes I know at this point in time. When I was local, I actually was serving on the Private Industry Council. Some of you will remember private industry councils came before the WIBs, and I was a private sector member on that. So my roots also go deep in workforce development. I was also proud to be part of the leadership team that recruited the Campus Without Walls, which is a branch of Southside Community College. At the time I was at Emporia, 75% of the people over the age of 25 did not have a high school diploma. And we were trying to recruit manufacturers. That was a difficult thing to do. So again, we understand the connection between economic development, jobs, and workforce development. The Virginia Economic Development Partnership, our job in life is to recruit and retain and grow companies in your area and all across the Commonwealth. And the first thing that companies ask us about is, tell me what your workforce looks like around the Halifax area, describe the skill sets, and tell me where I'm going to get my employees 5 years from now. It's workforce, workforce, workforce. And with advanced manufacturing, it's even more critical, because the types of skill sets that advanced manufacturers need don't just develop overnight. They take a long time to learn and to become highly qualified and highly professional. So it's a very, very important aspect of what you're learning today to apply back to whatever location you've come from. VDP, we market the Virginia workforce story. We don't actually train anybody. We don't have money for training, but we market and tell the story of Virginia's workforce and the systems that produce the workforce 5 and 10 years from now. And that's a challenge. Virginia is a very big state. Everything from the defense concentration up in Northern Virginia and Hampton Roads to the coal mines of southwestern Virginia to the agri-based tourism angle in Central Virginia. It's a very, very diverse state, which is good overall, but it creates challenges in how you train and educate people to serve in manufacturing jobs. So part of my interest in being here today, and part of the reason I serve on the Virginia Career Pathways Task Force and the Commonwealth Graduate Engineering Program Advisory Council, is to help piece together the assets that are present in Virginia that can do training and education, and be able to tell my clients, here's how Virginia can solve your workforce problem. There are some unique stories out here. You'll learn a lot today, and I really appreciate the opportunity to be here. Nettie, thank you very much. Dr. Doug and Christy as well.
Thank you. My name's James Groves. I'm a faculty member in the engineering school at the University of Virginia up in Charlottesville, and I've been employed there since 1998. I believe my involvement in this panel today comes out or stems from my oversight of our educational outreach programs over the last decade. Since probably about 2001, I have been our director at the University of Virginia. I've been our director of the Commonwealth Graduate Engineering Program, CGEP. And that program is focused on educating engineers at the master's degree level. Now, that certainly is fairly high up on the academic educational chain, but what happened as I, in 2001, 2002, 2003, went around the state and talked about the availability of master's degrees at a distance through the Commonwealth Graduate Engineering Program, where students could go to South Boston or to Danville or to Abington and tap into master's level courses from the University of Virginia, Virginia Tech, and others. I heard from communities and I heard from companies saying, wow, that's wonderful, you're bringing the education out to us. The challenge is you're bringing out master's degree education, and that's only a small slice of the educational pie that we need. What we really need in our community, particularly we heard this in the rural communities, was we need access a little bit further down the educational food chain, certainly at the bachelor's degree level in engineering. And at the time, in the early part of last decade, the state was not bringing undergraduate engineering education out into the communities, particularly the rural communities. And so working actually with Barry Johnson and Dean Ayler at the engineering school, a number of us got together. We talked with the Virginia Community College system and said, what can we together perhaps do to start to address some of the educational needs for things like advanced manufacturing around the state. And so through a partnership that we now call the Engineers Produced in Virginia program, the Virginia Community College system and the engineering school at the University of Virginia are seeking to complete that pipeline and bring undergraduate engineering education out to communities all across the state. So as you may know, there are 23 community colleges in Virginia, and they each have their service region. In 2007, 8 of those 23 community colleges offered an engineering degree, and they were in the Northern Virginia, Richmond, Tidewater areas for the most part. As a part of our Engineers Produced in Virginia initiative, we now offer engineering in 14 out of the 23 service regions, and those community colleges serve another 4 regions. So we don't quite have coverage around the state from the community colleges, but pretty close. 18 of the 23 service regions now have 2-year degrees in engineering, where students can take the first 2 years of an undergraduate program in engineering. And then one of the things that we looked at was, one of the problems is there are students from a Danville, South Boston, and elsewhere who even before we got started with the Produce program were interested in studying engineering, but they would end up going to Charlottesville or to Blacksburg or to Richmond to earn their bachelor's degree, and once they earned that degree, they didn't come back to their home community. So you were having a talent drain from these communities. And so one of the innovations of the Produce program was that the University of Virginia would bring the 3rd and 4th year of the undergraduate studies out into the communities. And so we do that today. The community colleges are responsible for the first 2 years of undergraduate engineering education. UVA then brings, by use of the internet, live, interactive, real-time online programs, the 3rd and 4th year studies. And our real goal is not just to have the students studying engineering here in these communities, but simultaneously studying and working for companies. So the neat thing about having the students stay in their community and be able to tap into the education over the high-speed internet is those students could go and work in an engineering setting at 8 a.m. in the morning. And when class starts at 11 a.m., they just need to go to their cubicle or to the conference room, open up their computer, participate in class, and then at the end of class go back to working. And we think this has a real opportunity for the students to interweave their education and work experience, tie them to the local communities, network with technology professionals, and ultimately stay in the community. The last comment I would give is we graduated our first small class from this program in Lynchburg in May of this year, just 8 graduates, but all 8 of those graduates are now employed with engineering employers in Lynchburg. 4 different companies hired them. So it's a young, growing model, but I think it's very applicable to how do we perhaps serve the advanced manufacturing needs of companies, particularly in places like South Boston, Danville, Martinsville, and elsewhere. So I appreciate the opportunity to be involved and look forward to the questions and discussion this afternoon.
Thank you, James, and thank you to the Higher Ed Center for putting on this wonderful symposium. My name is Leigh Cockram. I'm the Executive Director of the Southern Virginia Regional Alliance, which is a regional economic development marketing organization. I represent 4 counties and 2 cities in Southern Virginia, and Halifax is our most eastern community. That's part of our footprint. My job is to recruit new industries into Southern Virginia. I don't focus on existing industry, entrepreneurship or small business, or tourism-related economic development. I focus on recruiting companies to come to our industrial parks, to fill up empty lots that we have, or to go into our existing industry, former existing industry, vacant building space that we have here. So I hear a lot, as Liz said earlier, one of the first questions that we're always asked when we're trying to recruit a company to this area is, what is your labor force? What's your labor shed look like? It's not a labor force in Halifax. It's going to be a labor force in a 25 and a 50-mile radius, because they understand that folks are going to commute in and out of a community for a good-paying job and sustainable living wages. So they're very curious as to what are we doing for not only the current workforce that we have here, but the pipeline development. The average age in Southern Virginia is about 44, so we have an aging population compared to areas such as Charlotte or the Greenville, Spartanburg area, areas that we absolutely compete with on a daily basis for projects. And I have to say to Liz, this made me feel a little bit better when you said 75% of your population didn't have a high school diploma. We're only at 24% of our population does not have a high school diploma. Still very, very high, very high in this day and age. So that's an area that we're trying to overcome. I sit on a regional workforce collaborative called the Dan River Regional Collaborative, which is in the process now of working with a variety of partners across the state of Virginia and region on becoming a certified work-ready community, which is by ACT standards and the career readiness certificates. So I see Catherine DeRozier here from the Virginia Manufacturing Association, and they are a big partner of ours in that effort, who bring a lot of knowledge not only from manufacturing in Southern Virginia, but manufacturing across the state for what companies are looking for. So I appreciate the time to be here and look forward to the discussion.
We will have the opportunity to see how well they can pass the mic on this particular question. We had a sequence planned, and we have to change it just a little bit, but that's okay, because the mic is portable, right? To begin our dialogue and ensure that we are listening to your response from a similar perspective, please define advanced manufacturing from your organization's perspective, and how it is distinguished from our traditional manufacturing or manufacturing of old. And Barry will be first, and then we're going to jump over to Leigh, to James, to Deborah, and then to Liz.
Right. Well, thank you. And I promise I'm not first in all of the cases, so you'll get to hear others going first. But I think it's a really good question, because I think that the question in a lot of communities is, why is advanced manufacturing different from manufacturing? And the example I like to give, since I grew up not far from here, is Danville, Virginia. When I was going to high school at Gretna High School, Dan River Corporation employed about 14,000 people in a community, Danville, that had a population of about 39,000. And going through high school, you had anybody in my high school years could get a job at night at Dan River. They could get a job during the summer at Dan River. When they graduated, they could walk in and get a job. There wasn't as much required in terms of their skill set in order to be able to do that. But now when you look at advanced manufacturing, and I guess I would use that example as what's not advanced manufacturing, because I think advanced manufacturing is really the integration of technology, people, processes, optimized processes, and policies. And the first two of those, the technology and the people, really drive a lot of what, in my mind, defines advanced manufacturing. It's extensive use of automation. So you're not using people to do things, you're using machines to do things, and the people in turn are programming the machines, maintaining the machines, and operating the machines. And so I think advanced manufacturing is a heavy emphasis on technology and automation. It's also a heavy emphasis on a higher skill set of people required to work in that environment. Very heavy emphasis on information technology skills, very heavy emphasis on collaboration skills. In the old days in that Dan River mill, I could probably pretty much on my own take this bolt of cloth from point A to point B and do that over and over and over again. Now the problems require me to collaborate with my colleague that's working on that factory floor as well. So I think that concept of collaboration, that concept of high technology, extensive use of technology, integrating more skilled workers into the process, and then optimizing those processes so that you can make more products, more advanced products, more complicated products, and make them faster and more cost effective. And that's really what the automation is doing for you. And I think the other thing that's really important that definition highlights is that with automation, labor rates are becoming less relevant in the decision of a company to locate a facility in a particular region. The companies that I met as I was going through the CCAM process, most of them had labor cost as a percentage of their product in single digits. And so they were driven by other factors, availability of skilled workforce being one of them. But that's my definition of advanced manufacturing.
Thank you, and I would completely agree with Barry's definition. Southern Virginia defines advanced manufacturing as companies using technology and automation in their process. And that can be anything. I mean, we see lumber companies are using technology. I don't know if anybody's been to a lumber yard lately, but the guys are sitting in wonderful chairs, and they move their feet and their hands, and they're getting logs from the raw material and trimming them down to boards, to food processing, to furniture. There's a company in Danville called IKEA who manufactures product for Swedwood, and it's very automated. So you're hard-pressed nowadays to find a company in any industry sector that is not defined as advanced manufacturing the way that Southern Virginia defines advanced manufacturing. And all of the companies that we're working with are requiring folks to have a higher level of skill sets, not necessarily four-year degrees. The majority of the companies that we're looking for are looking for folks who have some sort of technical certificate, an associate or an associate's degree. Absolute must is a high school diploma. So if you're still in high school here, finish. But those are the areas that that we're seeing the folks interested in, understanding what our labor looks like. They think four-year degrees are important, they're great to have, but they're going to be able to recruit that talent if they pay enough, more than likely. What they're really interested are the 500 folks that are going to be working the floor, and what does that skill set look like. So that's how we define advanced manufacturing, and how we're going about trying to tackle the workforce needs in Southern Virginia of understanding how to get folks graduating high school with some sort of certificate already in place, how to get folks who are unemployed to understand the value of going back to be retrained and getting a certificate so they can help us be marketable and getting companies to come back to the area.
Yeah, I might just add a couple of comments here. As I was reflecting on this beforehand, I think a little bit of manufacturing in the old day as a bit of craft, the individual craftsperson being able to figure out and how to make something, and they themselves had the skills necessary to create the product. And today, as Barry suggested, so much it's not the people themselves that are making the products, it's the advanced tools that will be there in the manufacturing facility. And so the workers really need to understand how to interface with those tools in a much different way than perhaps the person working in the textile facility 50 or 100 years ago. The other thing about advanced manufacturing is that the tools are really engaging, as I think about it from an educator's perspective, a much more advanced use of underlying math, science, knowledge are integrated into these tools because the products that are being created are much more sophisticated than, just take a look at the automobile. If you just imagine the Model T of 75 or 100 years ago versus the automobile that we drive around in today, that itself is much more sophisticated, and the tools required to put that together and integrate it is much more sophisticated. And the other thing I would say is, so much now these tools in advanced manufacturing are, they're not quite video games, but so much of it has that information technology interface. And I think one of the dramatic things you would see compared to the older manufacturing facilities is so much of the electronics digital interface, and the employees need to be comfortable programming, interfacing with those tools, and making sure that they're operating properly. So I think I'll stop with that.
I think Barry did an excellent job defining advanced manufacturing. And I just would like to say to the students in the audience that when you're in class and teachers have you working together on projects, when you're working on team building and collaboration and critical thinking and any kind of project-based learning, that's the type of learning that the skills that you will need when you get into the workplace if you are working not just in advanced manufacturing but almost all workplaces now. And also the Workforce Investment Board, when the people that we deal with, a lot of them are people who have been laid off from perhaps old manufacturing ways. And I think, Leigh, you mentioned, the helping people understand the importance of being retrained. You have to be able to show to people that the old way doesn't exist anymore, and that there is a reason for them to be retrained as an adult, and going back to school as an adult is not always something that everybody likes. Some people do, but there's a large part of the population that didn't look positively on education when they were in it, and certainly don't want to do it again when our minds aren't as quick as they used to be. So, there are issues there with motivating people for that change too, as far as from old ways of manufacturing to the new.
And just to build on Deborah's comment, how many of you in the room are manufacturers or work in a manufacturing facility? Anybody? Okay. I would suggest that advanced manufacturers, one characteristic of the culture of your organization is that you expect your employees to engage in lifelong learning, whether that's through curriculums that you deliver or curriculums at the community college or other certificated programs, or through VMA, our partners at the Commonwealth. And I would suggest that culture, that attitude, is different than it would have been 25 years ago in a manufacturing environment.
Thank you. Have you received some really good information thus far? We're just getting started. Are you starting to jot down your questions? You're going to have an opportunity to raise your hand and ask some of those questions in a little while. This question will start with Liz, and we'll go to Dr. Groves, Leigh, and then come all the way back to Barry, ending with Deborah. According to the Manufacturing Institute, manufacturers will need approximately 10 million new skilled laborers by 2020. Currently, 52% of American employers have had trouble filling jobs. Based on your work with employers in Virginia, is there a gap in the skills employers need for today's manufacturing environments compared with the skills available workers have? If so, is the gap shrinking or growing, and why?
Okay, that's a great question. And so my answer comes back to the same answer I was given when I started in economic development, or for those of you who may be involved in real estate, you may recognize this as well. Location, location, location. And what does that have to do with the skills gap? Where the workforce is, where it exists for advanced manufacturers, is not necessarily matching up with where the advanced manufacturers are choosing or considering to locate. So do we have a skills gap in the country? There are some reports, and I'm going to cite one from BCG, which is a fairly well-respected international consulting firm, that talks about the U.S. needing approximately 80 to 100,000 skilled manufacturing workers. But it's not that they don't exist in the country. It's that they don't live where the jobs are, or the jobs are not where the skilled workers live. So do we have a transportation problem, or do we have a skilled workforce problem? My suggestion to you would be that in our line of work, in economic development, we very frequently, in dealing with companies, as they consider where they want to put new manufacturing plants, they have to think about definitely workforce, depth of workforce, skills of workforce. But they also have to have the right piece of real estate. They have to have the right physical infrastructure, the right transportation system, the right proximity to their customers and proximity to their suppliers. So there's a lot of variables going into a site location decision. And the ability of our state to match the workforce with those real estate characteristics is really where the challenge is. This also isn't new. I want to give you a couple of real quick case studies. And Steve Bridges from my office, who I'm really happy to see here, may remember a couple of these. Way back in 1999, were you all born in 1999? Okay. Way back in 1999, there was a company in northwestern Virginia, manufacturing company, well respected in the furniture industry, looking for a reason to put a manufacturing plant in Virginia. And they were going to manufacture wood components for their furniture. 300 jobs, roughly, probably a $30 to $40 million capital investment, the kind of manufacturing plant that everybody in this state would want to have. The ideal location from a customer supply chain was far, far southwest Virginia. When the company analyzed the workforce, the training that they needed to provide was not resident in the community college system over in southwest Virginia. The curriculum that they needed and specified they had to have in order to locate in southwest Virginia was resident in Tidewater Community College. And way back then, there was no inter-community college sharing agreement for curriculums. We lost the project to West Virginia because West Virginia had the real estate and had the curriculum. We had no policy, to go Barry's point, no policy to cross-share curriculums. Okay, so that's one example. Second example would be Newport News Shipyard. I know you all know it's the largest employer in Virginia. They estimate anywhere between 5,000 and 10,000 new hires that they will need in the next 10 years. Are those people resident in Hampton Roads, or are they resident here in Southern Virginia and in far southwestern Virginia in the Valley? I would suggest the jobs are there, but there's a geographic mismatch. And I would also suggest Areva, just to your north in Lynchburg, nuclear company, fantastic company, very unique workforce needs in terms of skill sets and in terms of how they deploy their workforce. Their workforce is deployed at 3-month cycles when they go out to refurbish a nuclear plant. Areva tried to structure a workforce recruitment and training policy that would allow them to recruit from Southern Virginia and Southwestern Virginia for those 3 to 6 month cycles, and would let those employees come back to their homes in Southern and Southwest Virginia when they were off. That's the kind of geographic adaptivity that we're seeing in the workforce now. The last thing I would say is that a new model we're seeing in terms of, is there a skill shortage? Yes. There are some regions in Virginia, from the economic development perspective, who, when they're working with a company, a manufacturing company, are no longer trying to sell their own workforce. They are committed, the economic development region is committing to doing a nationwide analysis of where the skill sets reside and then going to those locations and recruiting the workforce to support the manufacturer. Totally flip-flopping our normal processes. So I'd suggest to you that there is a skill shortage, I believe, but I believe it's much more of a mismatch shortage.
So just piggybacking a little bit on some of Liz's comments, when I've been involved with developing, particularly our undergraduate program, the Produce program, I've been out around the state and in various communities, in many rural communities. A couple things resonate with Liz's comments. One is that I do think across the state as a whole, we have the education programs necessary to provide the skills that Virginia citizens need and the companies want to hire. But you're quite right that the location of the program, the location of the workforce and company doesn't always match together. And thus, in a community perhaps like South Boston, you may have individuals who could be trained, but the program may not be available there. I also think that you find that some of these programs are pretty challenging. Even if the education program does happen to be available, let's say you have an adult worker who needs retraining, trying to figure out how to get them into a program where they have a family, they need to work, and then making sure not only that the right program is there, but it's offered in the right form, meaning time of day, time of the week, when the students could actually connect to it is a real challenge. And then, for the adult learners, you see in some of these high technology areas that they are missing some technical areas of knowledge, whether particularly mathematics, but math and science skills, technical skills, maybe even a comfort in computing skills, interfacing with the advanced tools that they're in their 40s and 50s, and maybe they just don't have that much experience, and so they need to receive some real training in that. And so I think there is a gap, and we in the education system have some work to do. And I also think all the communities helping the citizens understand exactly why those skills are important is also a critical area, though. So I'm not sure that it's necessarily a moving target. I mean, it does advance as technology continues to advance, but I don't think the rate of movement of the technology and skills is so great. I think it's really an issue of making sure that the right education programs are available, and then that they're in the form, time and otherwise, where the students can connect with them to make their way through.
So this may be an interesting response, to this question, but what I see is there is nationally a skills gap shortage, and I'm not sure if it's actually a skills gap shortage or if that we've all convinced ourselves that there is a skills gap shortage. And I say that because we just had a workforce forum here at the Higher Ed Center a couple of weeks ago, and we had 3 companies in the region that are in advanced manufacturing. And I posed the question, if you had one criteria on a resume that you would hire someone, what would that be? And they said critical thinking skills, if they could learn and they could work with others. Well, that's not a welding degree. That's not a manufacturing certificate. That's not going and getting some other sort of an engineering degree. So I'm not sure how this all lines up. And I'm not sure employers understand what they're looking for when they're hiring. You hear that across the board from existing industry, from companies that you're working with. What are you looking for? What do you need? Well, I can train them if they have these skill sets. Now, they do want a high school diploma. We do run into that. But it is very interesting that companies aren't saying we need 500 people with a welding certificate. We need 600 metallurgists for a metalworking company. So, it's kind of like the economy. Are we better off than we were 4 years ago or not? It's up to who you talk to. It's what the media tells you in your mind. So I'm not sure if we actually have a skills gap shortage or if that we've all convinced ourselves that we do, and that we aren't willing to take risks on employees who may not have the certificate that you're looking for on paper. Why can't you train them? The majority of companies that we work with say, we have our own training program. Thank you for your training assistance and your money, but we're going to train them in-house. So even if you have some sort of degree, they're going to take that and customize it to a program that they have. We've heard that from a variety of folks. One of the things that our region is working on is trying to figure out what our workforce story is. That actually came from Will Powers of Rolls-Royce, who toured the region, gosh, a year and a half ago. And he said, what is your workforce story? Well, our workforce story is that we have trainable, semi-skilled labor in Southern Virginia that can work for your company. If you want to take the time to invest in training those folks, you're going to be successful here. We're working on becoming, again, the career readiness certificates, and becoming a work-ready community. And that's going to be our story, and that's how we're going to promote coming to Southern Virginia. We're going to invest in making sure that people are trainable, but we also ask companies, you've got to invest a little time to train them to your skills. You're going to do it anyway, so why not come to a place, use our training resources, and train them the way that you see fit to be successful.
I'm going to, I think, build on Leigh's comment a little bit because I agree with that, and I'll use my Dan River Mills analogy a little bit more. And back when I was in high school, the way you applied for a job there is you went by, you picked up an application, you filled it out, you dropped it off, and you either got called back or you didn't get called back, and you more or less got that job without going through a really substantive interview because it was a fairly low level of skills required to get that job. To use Rolls-Royce as another example, they spend an entire day with an in-person interview with everybody that they hire. And they take them through a series of things that don't involve operating a machine, that do not involve being on the factory floor. It involves logical thinking. It involves problem solving. It involves working with their colleagues to solve a problem, collaboration skills, the so-called soft skills. And I find the older I get, the more I sound like my father. But, it really is a lot to being on time, being there when you say you're going to be there, and having those soft skills that are just invaluable in getting those jobs. The other thing that I feel like I have to mention, I've been with two companies recently that have told me, two advanced manufacturers that have told me the biggest problem they have hiring people is finding enough people that can pass the drug test. And that's either pass the test to get in the door for an interview or pass test on a random basis as they're going through the process. So, these are all, I think, items that just we have to figure out a way to address. And I'm not sure that we have necessarily great ways to address some of these, but it's a problem because I think we have the workers. I think you're right. I think the workers exist, and I think the more advanced skills that we always talk about are not necessarily the biggest stumbling blocks that we have in getting those workers into jobs.
And I agree with Leigh as well that there is a shortage of skills, but sometimes it's because a person doesn't have the confidence to get their resume correct and write the skills that they have. They don't have a piece of paper that says they have them, but it's something that they have done for many years. But I do want to encourage the young people in the room that while you have the opportunity to be in school and get the credential, get the diploma, go to post-secondary, get a certificate, get that now, so that when you are looking for work, you have that in front of you. And with the number of people that we have unemployed, employers have choices now. They have a lot to choose from. And unfortunately, the people that might have the soft skills, so to speak, you can't really put that on paper. And I think also with the high schools decreasing the dropout rate, that hopefully kids will be staying in school longer and coming out of high school with more skills. I think that is important.
Thank you very much. The next question will be responded to first by Dr. Groves. Competition is very much part of everyday life in the world of work and in our society. We know that employers must be competitive to not only stay in business but to grow. We also know that employers oftentimes compete for the best employees. What are the skills that current and future workers will need to have in order to compete and take advantage of job and career opportunities in today's and tomorrow's advanced manufacturing workplaces? And if possible, please give us some specific examples of how these skills are or will be used in the manufacturing-based setting.
Good. Yeah, I think we've touched on a few of these already just in the last question as we were answering. Some of the things I've jotted down even before then. I do think there's a certain level of ability to analyze a situation and go through problem solving there. So you may be looking at one of these advanced tools and I don't know, it's IT digital interface and it's got lights blinking at you and it's giving you an error message. I mean, you've got to be able to perhaps have been trained and then to apply that training to resolve, understand what the problem is and resolve it there in real time. And so it takes a certain ability to logically go through, and I think a little bit from an engineering perspective, given my background, it's a little bit like executing a checklist. Whether you're in the cockpit of an airplane or perhaps on a construction project, you've got to say, okay, I'm looking at this tool, this advanced tool. It's telling me something's not right. All right, what do I do with that information? And then can I check off and resolve the issues? So that analytical problem-solving skill and the discipline to go through and execute the sort of training that you've had, I think is certainly important. A couple other things. Certainly today, I've indicated a couple times, these tools so often have the computer IT digital interface, and I think a level of comfort with that broadly, depending on where you are in the workforce, your age and retraining, your level of comfort with computer IT type technology may not, you may not be particularly comfortable with that, and so I think developing a level of competence. Two other things I wanted to mention. One, I think, is communication skills overall. So a little bit building on Barry's comments about that. And I would say communication, certainly written, oral communication, working in teams. But I would even, and this builds on some of my area of work, is being comfortable communicating with individuals at a distance. So this is, you're in a facility in South Boston. You've got a tool that's on your plant floor, and that tool was manufactured in Asia or Europe or somewhere else in North America, and there's something wrong with it. And it's expensive for that company that supplied the tool to fly that person in for a couple days. Your company could pay hundreds or thousands of dollars a day to have that technician come in. And maybe what you have to do is communicate at a distance with their technician. Maybe the technician can connect into the tool over the internet and see some things, and you've got to be able to comfortably communicate, interface with that tool, interface with that person at a distance, communicate to them what you're seeing and experiencing in order to resolve the problem. And another one which I think goes along with that is actually today so much of advanced manufacturing is being part of a global supply chain where the employees, as they do their troubleshooting, either with someone at a distance or someone that comes in to work on a tool or something to fix it, that person that they're interacting with is not necessarily from Southern Virginia. And so appreciating at some level that there are global cultural differences, and that you, even as a floor employee, shop worker, you may be interfacing that they fly someone in from Japan or someone from Germany. And understanding how to professionally interact with them, a bit that soft skills set, I think is increasingly important. And so at some level, somewhere in the education system, we don't need to make them experts in foreign language or diplomats, but a certain level of diplomacy and appreciation that there are differences is a skill that I think is valuable today in the global economy.
Yeah, and I'll just build kind of on what James said and add a few other things that we see. And one of them would be for companies or for employees to be flexible. More and more companies are going to ask you to do multiple jobs and not just work on one machine every day. You need to be able to understand that you're going to have to move to where you're needed. product changes, the environment's going to change on what's being sold, and you need to be flexible with that. And I think that that's been tough for the existing workers to understand that you're now having to learn a variety of skill sets rather than just using your one tool over and over again. And I would say another piece is definitely the communication and team working. It's not the day of old where you move, as Barry said earlier, you move one pallet of material from one spot to another. You have to now talk to your inventory folks, because companies don't want to hold as much inventory as they had in the past, and find out, is there room for this? Do I need to sell this? Should we be running this product anymore? So understanding team working capability and being flexible in your work environment are two skill sets that are tough to be taught. Those are skills that you just have to kind of learn to adapt and build on over time, but they're going to be very important in the new jobs that we recruit to the region from here on out.
I'm going to continue that theme. One of my favorite expressions is that I don't care how much you know until I know how much you care, and I think that's a really important attribute for people to have as well. And actually, I think that plus my second one, work ethic, I think are real strategic advantages for communities like the community that we're in today. And it certainly was from the community that I grew up in, because we had very strong work ethic. We didn't have a choice, but I think that that work ethic, that discipline, that passion for what you were doing, caring about what you were doing, and being proud of what you're doing and what you're delivering to your employer, I think are key skill sets that again fall into that soft skills and category. And I think we're seeing a little bit of a trend here, because all of the skills that we see as necessary to give you that competitive advantage are not necessarily the advanced things that you see in courses or other programs, but it's that backbone of soft skills that are really necessary to get you ahead.
And just to add, I won't repeat any of those that have been said, but business fundamentals, having some fundamental business skills would be useful. Also, being able to focus on the customer regardless of where you're working. If you keep in mind who is the customer, and it goes back to that taking pride in your work and delivering the best product, and being able to check, examine, and document issues if they need to go back and something has to be corrected. Those are other skills, again, that it's not like a welding skill or another technical skill, but they are very important.
And just to close the loop, we've had some advanced manufacturing clients that have come and toured Virginia, and when they ask us about workforce, we use data-driven information to provide them factual data about the availability of workforce. But at the end of the day, the real sales comes when they meet with an existing manufacturer who actually employs people in that area. What I've heard companies, our clients, come out of those meetings and say the best thing they like about demonstrating that there is a ready workforce is somebody who has an employee who understands the bottom line of the business. Somebody who's in the aerospace company or in the furniture manufacturing company or in the plastics manufacturing company who understands what is, take Nestle in Martinsville, Henry County. An employee who understands what Nestle's strategic goals are and what his or her role is within that plant to make that plant successful for the corporation. So it's a little bit of this business knowledge, but it's also contextual in that our clients, when they hear somebody on the shop floor talk about why my job is important to my company, there's a contextual awareness that really makes a difference.
Wow. Wonderful responses. I'd like to give the audience an opportunity to ask questions of our panelists or to add to what our panelists have said with regards to advanced manufacturing skills gap or lack thereof, possibly, or just be questioning what that might be, and anything related to what we've covered thus far. Yes, sir.
So it seems like there's been a lot of discussion this morning about recruiting from like high school grads and the community colleges and such like that, especially with soft skills. what role do you perceive the advanced degrees such as master's and PhDs having in this advanced manufacturing renaissance?
I guess since I've got the microphone, I'll start and then we'll pass it on. Certainly this is something that we think about. I'll comment on a couple advanced manufacturing industries that I'm familiar with. When I got started as an employee at the University of Virginia in 1998, it was just after then Governor, George Allen, getting ready to run for senator, was just, the Silicon Dominion had come along. And so the advanced manufacturers at the time were IBM, which became Dominion Semiconductor, and the facility over near Richmond as well for semiconductor manufacturing. And what they needed was, they talked often about a workforce pyramid with a very broad base, meaning a lot of technician type workers, a smaller number of bachelor's degrees, and then smaller number of masters and PhD. So not that the masters and PhD aren't important, but relatively speaking, the numbers are nowhere near what you need. However, they absolutely do have, at some level, a need for master's, PhD type talent. So they, let's take what is now Micron Technology in Manassas, which was the Dominion Semiconductor years ago. They're developing the memory chips that go in our iPhones or our camcorders and everything else that are there. They're looking, their shop floor is using these advanced manufacturing tools. And it's critical that those tools come up and start producing product correctly as fast as possible. And often the people that have to figure that out, how do we fine-tune and get the tool up and running, can be the individuals, particularly with the master's degrees, but could be masters and PhD. And I think one thing that we would certainly, from a university perspective, would love to see in Virginia is more companies that have their research and development facilities in the state. And when you get not just into manufacturing, but you get into the research and development of companies, they often have a greater number of masters and PhDs than you might find in that manufacturing facility that needs just a handful of those high-level employees. Any other comments?
A quick comment and pass it to Barry. I think it is the pyramid, and so it's the scalability of that number. But again, when a company looks at a location in Virginia or anywhere else, they're not looking just today to manufacture the product. They are looking, where do we get our leaders from? Where do we get our people who will be engaged in community and civic service? And to go to your point, where are we going to start to think about innovation and the result of new products that will keep us competitive in the world? All of those tend to require the higher degrees.
I think that one of the things that CCAM is focused on is bridging that gap between idea creation, technology development, and commercialization, and putting it on the factory floor. And I think that, as with any bridge, you need people that can understand what it's really like on the factory floor, but also understand the new technologies and the new ideas that are coming out and can serve as that bridge. So you need people that can go from what we call technology readiness level 3 or so, which is advanced stage of research, to 9, which is full commercialization. And I think that is where, that's a role that the advanced degrees can play, is bridging that gap. I think one of the challenges I think we have in the advanced degrees in manufacturing is convincing them that manufacturing is a great career. And I think part of that is going to be raising the visibility of the manufacturing jobs, raising the visibility of the types of jobs, and the excitement that exists with actually making something. The panel sat here, or sat in the other room the other day and yesterday, and talked about the way that you create value is you either make it, or you grow it, or you mine it. And the making being that manufacturing part. And I think generating excitement about manufacturing careers for not only folks on the production floor with a high school or community college program degree, but also creating that excitement with the engineers that are coming out of our bachelor's and master's and PhD programs. One last comment. I've been in the facility, as I know James has, of Micron. And they do have, multiple PhDs on that floor, on that production floor. I was recently in Dublin, Virginia, visiting the Volvo Trucks facility. That's a manufacturing facility there, and was introduced to a University of Virginia graduate that had a master's degree from the University of Virginia that was a shop floor leader of a production team. And so I think there are opportunities for those advanced degree candidates that understand the business principles, understand productivity, understand the things that you need to get a team working together, that can be leadership positions in that manufacturing environment as well.
Excellent. Thank you for the question. I'm going to change up a little bit, panelists, but I promise it won't put you in a tizzy. The next question I'm going to ask only two of our panelists to respond to, so that we can get through a few more of the questions, because we have less than 20 minutes and we want to make sure that we end on time. I'm going to ask Leigh and Liz to respond to this question. As the shortage of the needed skilled workers become a mounting problem, manufacturers and policymakers are looking for ways to address the issue. Economy in Crisis identified 3 key steps for reversing the trend of skilled staffing shortages. The 3 key steps identified were strengthening educational partnerships, investing in training, and engaging with tomorrow's workforce. What are your recommendations for addressing the skills gap faced by today's workers and employers, or not necessarily the skills gaps as you brought to our attention, but the way to blend the needed gaps, the needed skills to the work that's needed?
Sure. I agree with the steps. I think, and just to go over those, they were strengthening educational partnerships, investing in training, and engaging with tomorrow's workforce. I think the biggest piece that's missing, though, is where's the employer engagement? I think these are 3 great steps, but they're only good steps if you have employer buy-in on the other end of them. And if you're only engaging in workforce partnerships that have value to the folks that are actually going to be hiring people. And I think, and if you're only investing in training with skill sets that are going to be meaningful to the employer. So I think that's the biggest problem that I see, not only in our region, but I think nationwide, is where's the employer engagement? And I mean the nitty-gritty employer engagement, not just, oh, that sounds great. I think that today I need 5 maintenance technicians. But what are you going to need long term? What do you really want out of our training programs? Who are viable candidates for you? When you're screening a resume, what are you actually looking for? Those are tough questions that a lot of employers really can't answer. And a lot of employers will go, well, I don't know, let me ask my HR person. But then they're still sitting in a room complaining to us that they can't find the employees needed to be successful, but they don't really know what they're looking for. So I would really say that the biggest challenge in workforce training, again, is understanding what are employers actually, what do you want out of your employees? What do you want someone to look like that you feel like you're going to be able to be successful in the long term by training those people and having them on your staff for years to come, and not have the rapid turnover that we've seen with companies as of late?
Really challenging question, Nettie. What I would suggest is that I agree with Leigh. The 3 steps I think are right. The employer engagement has to be where it starts, and I would hold up to you that the current Virginia Career Pathways Network system that's in place at the state level is a framework for policy that was led by business to help us understand, particularly in the advanced manufacturing arena, what kind of programs, curriculum, products actually help. So I think you have to have a framework at the policy level at the state, and then that needs to flow down and be delivered at the regional level. And that's where challenges come in, because the implementation at the regional level may be different in every region of the Commonwealth, and what one manufacturer, Cannon, Virginia, gets in Newport News, which may be exceptional and may be heard about by Swedwood here in the Southern Virginia area, may not be transferable as easily just because you have different people and systems implementing it. So that's a real barrier. The policy statement has to be there with the funding behind it, led by the business community, but the delivery of those tools has to happen at a regional and local level, and that's challenging. I would also advocate, and this is based on an employer that I met with last week, I would advocate that we too often put money into curriculum without thinking in the advanced manufacturing arena about what are you training on. Rolls-Royce, we've used them a lot. The manager from their Cross Point site, Tom Lohr, is passionate passionate about having the right equipment in any training facility so that students can learn on the equipment. And his passion just exudes. He believes that equipment is a catalyst. So out of a state policy, could there be a policy across the Commonwealth to ensure that our community colleges or other entities in the regions have funding to access the appropriate equipment that advanced manufacturers need? And it cannot be a one-time shot. And that's the last component I would say here. At the regional level and at the state level, this is not a dialogue you have this year and stop. This has to be an engagement that occurs annually and has metrics behind it to demonstrate progress. So sustainability, measurements, equipment, and the right policy and the right delivery methods are all in place.
And Leigh, I'm going to ask Deborah and James to respond to this question. What are your thoughts on the readiness of our current educational system from K-12 to and through higher ed to prepare our citizens with the skills needed to fill positions in advanced manufacturing at all levels?
Well, I think that the one thing that's lacking, maybe particularly in Southside Virginia, is just exposure. I think our kids need to get out of the classroom and go into manufacturing facilities, and I think that employers need to come into the school systems and have business education partnerships in place where there is dialogue. Students that are enrolled in career and technical education have these skill sets embedded in the curriculum, but students that don't take CTE classes may or may not, because they're in the college-bound courses and may not get training in these skill sets. We need qualified instructors. Most teachers have taught. They haven't come from manufacturing or from other places, worked in other places. They are teachers, just like I was. So you need to bring in people that from the workplaces, and also have a curriculum that's developed with input from employers, and also work experiences, internships, apprenticeships, and on-the-job training. All of those can help.
So a couple comments building on Deborah's comments there. I do think that when we think about the secondary school education, there is at some level a lack of awareness, lack of appreciation for advanced manufacturing. I think it's in part maybe all of our faults. You drive down the road and maybe you see the building where the advanced manufacturing is occurring. Chances are you haven't a clue what's actually going on behind the wall there. And if you and I don't know, don't think that the students that are 12, 14, 16 years old have any idea what goes on inside these facilities. And a lot of them would be pretty, whoa, that's cool, if they could see it, but they don't see it. And so I think one is a tighter coupling between the companies, getting engineers and others out into the school system talking about what they're doing, and vice versa, getting school students on tours to see what's going on there. I do think that in the K-12 environment, as we look at high technology, there is a challenge for the teachers who may be teaching English or history or language or even math and science. They don't have a background in advanced manufacturing. They themselves may never have been in those facilities. So how can we expect them to teach and spark an interest on the part of these students when maybe the teachers haven't even seen it? You see this a little bit, I think, about National Science Foundation grants, where they do these research experience for teachers. It's not just about connecting with the students, but maybe you also need to get the teachers out on tours of these facilities, English, history, any teacher, so that they themselves have a better appreciation of what advanced manufacturing is about. A couple other quick comments here in terms of the readiness. Sometimes I think in the national rhetoric there's a little too much focus on the 4-year bachelor's degree today. I think for a certain part of the workforce and individuals who are motivated, absolutely a bachelor's, master's, PhD is correct. But I do think that for many of these jobs, a high school plus an associates of applied science would be plenty of education, would open up great work opportunities for people. But what you see in the community colleges today is very large enrollments in the transfer degrees that go on to bachelor's, and the programs that terminate with the associates applied science are undersubscribed. And I think that's in part a problem with the national dialogue that's pushing everyone to get a bachelor's degree, and at least in part, I think it's misguided. We would love to have people with high school degrees and beyond, but not everybody needs to get a bachelor's degree, and that's not what all of these employers need. 2 last comments. I think, and this goes back to some of the comments Liz and I made a bit earlier, I think we have lots of great education programs around the state, but they're not pervasive across the state. And in this day and age, as the internet becomes more readily available, even in rural communities, I think we as a state are making a mistake not to leverage what the internet gives us to make programs more broadly available. And I think that could help workforce development. And finally, we've at one level said you don't need all this higher education, but there is a need for bachelor's degrees in areas like engineering, master's and PhD. And what we absolutely see for those type of jobs today is a real gap in the mathematics preparation in the K through 12 system. The students may not realize what track they need to get on as they go through high school, and so they haven't completed pre-calculus when they graduate from high school, and then they want to get an engineering job, and you say, well, before you can start your undergraduate degree in engineering, you got to take several semesters of bridging math because you graduated from high school, but you didn't take the math track that was necessary to get right on into engineering. And of all the things I know in terms of working with community colleges and university, the mathematics preparation in the K through 12 for those higher level bachelor's, master's, PhD, that is the big stumbling block. Real big problem right now.
Thank you. I'm going to ask Barry to respond to this question. And I'm going to move to how can we encourage and inspire young minds to pursue careers in advanced manufacturing? And I think that Dr. Rose answered some of that, but I'd like your perspective as well. And this will be the last question that I ask at this point, and if someone else wants to respond to that as well, that's fine. And if we have one more question from the audience, that will be fine as well.
Well, I think we have touched on the things that are needed to encourage and inspire young people to get interested in advanced manufacturing. I think the biggest issue in my mind is getting them the appropriate exposure to advanced manufacturing and understanding, what the careers are like, the opportunities that exist, and also what they are doing to create value. And I think that exposure, certainly several things. One would be, when we created the CCAM facility, one of the things we talked a lot about as we were doing that was that once that facility opened, we wanted to see yellow school buses there every day and to have them lined up to get in there. One of our partner centers in the UK has 7,000 visitors to the Advanced Manufacturing Research Center every year. Most of them K through 12 kids that are in high school or even junior high school or elementary school. So I think getting that exposure. The other thing we integrated into the design of the center is what we call the parade route. And so once we got the school buses there, we had a route that we wanted to take them through so that they could see what coating technology was like, see what advanced machining was like and what milling was like and other types of applications in that center, and see the coordinate measurement equipment that's in there and how it's used and what types of things are being measured. So I think exposing them to what is a really exciting field and letting them see it firsthand is a first step. We also mentioned internships and apprenticeships. I think that's incredibly important. If we could work with industry to get opportunities for students to get into a facility during the summer, over a break or whatever, and actually work in that facility, there's nothing more important than getting exposure to what's really going on and being there day after day with an internship. And then the last comment, I think, really the other expression we use in CCAM is industry-driven, university-executed. And that's really important, the industry-driven part of that. I think the engagement with industry, getting them involved, and I have to applaud what I've seen in this community because I think you've done that. I think you've got local industry heavily engaged in the activities that are going on here. But I think that there's no substitute for that, is to get the industry to help us understand what needs to be, what the opportunities are, not only now but in the future, and what we need to do to prepare young students for those opportunities. So I think those are the things, emphasizing really comments that we've already made.
I thought you were wrapping up pretty well.
I was going to just make one quick addition there, and I will make it quick. I think this bit of exposure is critical, and I think it needs to be this unrelenting drumbeat of exposure. I think it's wonderful. I've been involved where we do a one-off visit to somewhere like Gretna High School, and just for a day we talk about advanced manufacturing or science, engineering, and technology. But it can't be the one-off. It has to be the buses every single day pulling up in front of the facilities. It has to be the engineers and workers from those facilities coming out time and again to the schools, middle school and high school, talking to the students in order to, I think, really make an impact and get them excited.
Okay, so I can't sit here and not say this. When I started, I mentioned that back in 1984-90 time frame, Greensville County's high school diploma rate was so poor. I want to hold up as a relevant example for anybody in this room who's interested in what Barry and James have just talked about, to take a look at a program called CARES. Children Are Really Extra Special. It's a nonprofit organization in Emporia, Greensville, and it was designed solely to connect an entire grade level of 200 kids with an industry in the community for a 12-year period. Sustainable and consistent and age appropriate. So Purdue Farms, for example, adopted the kindergarten class. They all got t-shirts that said, "I'm a Purdue Biddy." They all got to go out and pet the little tiny chickens that were ultimately not going to live. We didn't tell them that. And then when they got into 4th and 5th grade, they got to go out and look at the office. And when they got into 6th and 7th grade, they got to understand how a truck works. And when they got older, they got to understand what really happens in Purdue's factories. And then as they got older than that, they understood the leadership roles of Purdue's executives. So I think that's a relevant example that was done in a very poor community at a grassroots level. And a second model I would hold up for you is Winchester, Frederick County. Consistently for the last 15 years, that community has engaged teachers as well as students to do twice annually visits with their manufacturing companies on a very, very focused basis targeted by sectors. It's a very well-run model, and it's one to emulate. So there are success stories in Virginia right now, and all these barriers we see. There are success stories.
Thank you so very, very much. Is there one question from the audience? Yes, sir.
I'd like to make a statement to piggyback on Dr. Groves' talk about notifying. It's great to get to the students, it's great to get to the schools, but ultimately we all know as parents we're going to make the ultimate decision for where our children are going to do. We're going to have a very high impact on their direction. And that, I think, is a component that was left out here. We need to be able to get that information to them. And just because you come into the schools as a parent and as a teacher, I know that information doesn't necessarily translate into getting home to the parents. Second, the question would be, based off successful models that you've seen, if one of you might want to address this, what have you seen as far as being a best case scenario for bringing this to, let's say that you have the training, you've got the capability, you have the land, the location aspect. What has been, from a recruiting standpoint, one of the key aspects of bringing that company into your region from a standpoint of settling down?
Sure. For workforce, is that it?
if you're a community college and you have the capability, you have for training, you have the land available within your region to bring a company in, and you want to actively recruit and you want to be able to train for those companies. What has been the scenario you've seen where the company made that choice?
Sure. So any time that we have a project that comes throughout the region, the community college that serves whatever location in Southern Virginia that the company is looking at is actively involved early on in the recruitment process, because we understand that training needs are extremely important to any company coming to Southern Virginia. So we work with the community colleges, and they sit at the table to offer all of their current programs that they have, as well as all of the customized training programs that they can put together for an employer. And we use training money from the state through the Department of Business Assistance. Our local workforce investment boards are very active in helping subsidize training costs for companies. And then our Dan River Regional Collaborative is another source of funding for training that we can use. So the community colleges are involved in just about every single project that we announce in Southern Virginia.
Thank you to the panelists. Thank you to our host, Dr. Doug with Riverstone, Dr. Betty with the Southern Virginia Higher Ed Center. We appreciate the opportunity to have this dialogue. And we state that there is a resurgence or renaissance of advanced manufacturing in the United States and certainly in Southern Virginia. There is also a current and a growing need for qualified workers to fill the jobs that are currently available and increasing in the manufacturing sector. We just heard that we need exposure at all levels of students, parents, teachers, and incumbent workers, because they don't know what is available beyond where they're currently working as well. Our panelists have certainly done an excellent job of sharing valuable information with us regarding how we can begin to close the gap or to take advantage of the skills that are out there so that people are qualified to do the jobs that are necessary. And I trust that we will continue to work collaboratively to continue to build a very compelling workforce story, Leigh, that this region can be proud of, that the Commonwealth of Virginia can be proud of, and that will ensure our region's economic success and viability. Again, thank you very much.